Tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou I ngā āhuatanga o te wā. Kua tai mai ki te tautoko, te kaupapa o te rā. Nō reira, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Welcome everybody. Oh, we don't want that though. That's terrible. Stop.
There you go.
Here goes Ben.
Sorry, Ray, for having to suffer through that twice.
I didn't know we would.
You did great.
You've got it in like right recording. I can't see any embarrassments coming through because you've got the heart rate.
My glasses are standing up. I have no words.
No one's getting to speak. If around the building again. Right. Peter? It's all right. Your name's over there.
Oh,
Come
I
on.
want to be with my people over here.
I know it's hard to shift, right? I'd find it difficult sitting over there too, but next to Buddy Roy and so forth.
We've still got the majority on this side. This is for the big people over here now, the Roy's not here.
Sorry, I just made her close it because it was my
She's
shoes.
just- Right. Having had some kind of out-of-body experience. I hope it's over. And Michaela, I need you to let me in, sorry. Welcome everybody again. As far as I'm aware, we don't have any apologies. Thanks, Michaela.
Jeremy McPhail. Or is he coming online?
He's not a member of the subcommittee.
I'm not sure.
He's likely to be on the sideline of a sports event. So we'll move to item 3, which is a confirmation of the minutes of 29th of June. Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Seconded, please. Councillor Roy, any comments, questions, changes?
Did people do their homework? Next meeting, homework. Come with something you have learned, a better way of doing something to share with the committee.
Hoping so, and we will do that time allowing at the end. We've got quite a full agenda already, so I'm hoping that, just in case. I sent you mine about the Carpathian Mountains and the refugees doing good environmental work in the forest. I'll put that motion, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried, thank you. Right, the Happens study, which made it to the news this last week. We've got Owen and Janelle to lead us through that, Owen specifically. So welcome, Owen, nice to have you with us today. Talk us through your presentation, please.
Good job for both.
Madam Chairman, may I
Yes.
ask a question?
Yes.
I'm just wondering about the relevance of this. I mean, I'm not being critical of the presentation that's to come. I'm sure it's going to be fascinating, but why is it in the climate change subcommittee? Why is it being presented here?
Because air quality is part of the climate change situation involving
And emissions.
traffic, emissions, home heating, health, etc.
For the spatial plan itself.
And this also means that we're putting it on record as a discussion.
Okay, I remain unconvinced, but thank you for the explanation.
Bear with us.
I shall. I always do.
Thanks, Owen. Take it away.
All right, try that again. So, this morning just going to run you through the Health and Air Pollution New Zealand study that was released last week. And so this is the third iteration of Health and Air Pollution in New Zealand, first completed 2007, subsequent revision in 2012, and most recently 2022. And the study assesses anthropogenic or human-caused air pollution, and it uses a base year of 2016. The difference, I suppose, for this assessment is that it looks at both particulate matter, in this case PM2.5, and nitrogen dioxide. And previous assessments have only looked at PM10 as a proxy. The PM2.5 and PM10 that fed into the study were taken from both actual monitoring sites, and also there was a methodology used to establish PM2.5 measurements for sites that weren't monitoring PM2.5. So where PM10 data was available, they were able to use a method to apply a PM2.5 value for that site. The NO2 exposure assessment was informed by the NZTA vehicle emissions dataset exposure tool. And so that is a tool that has the likes of vehicle traffic counts that goes into it, uses state highways and proximities from those state highways to give an indication of the degree of exposure that those people will face, and also is informed by local nitrogen dioxide monitoring that occurs in certain towns. So that's undertaken by NZTA. We don't ourselves do any NO2 monitoring as part of our Environment Southland monitoring program.
Readings at traffic lights or intersections where we get big backups of vehicles?
We don't. Environment Southland doesn't. NZTA do have a couple of sites at least in Invercargill, and one of those I believe is down on D Street, so right sort of in the middle of town. I'll tell you off the top of my head. I do know that it's down in the vicinity of the library, down in that sort of area. So they do try and pick a sort of a peak site, and then they'll have a background site as well, so that they've got other sites sort of over to the east of Queen's Drive as a kind of a background. So they do have some of that, but it is only monitored using diffusion tubes, which is a 30-day average. So it's not like we can tell hour by hour or minute by minute what's happening there. So we would have to install some good monitoring to understand that better.
Can I just, one of the reasons I'm here today is we've got a road transport South Otago meeting tomorrow. We've got a workshop dealing with emissions and what we can put into the long-term plan for the road transport as an indicator for all the TAs. I may be able to get some data to this committee that would actually help, because the question that comes up is, should we be doing some sort of monitoring NO2? Because of yesterday's discussion, it was very important that there was not just a fire issue burning, but there was more involved in that. And this report picks it up as human health. It doesn't really care where the particulates come from, but those particulates are having an effect. So if we can de-silo some of this stuff and have better communication attitude, we may be able to help each other as we go forward, because this looks like a bigger game plan than just one particular household burning wood type scenario burning coal.
Even that location you referred to, if all the heavy traffic has been bypassed at Victoria Street and going down the back, you're missing a lot of the heavy diesel engines that are turning off if you're monitoring, or if NZTA are monitoring down near the library. You're going to perhaps catch the buses, but who else is down there?
Can the tracking actually differentiate between heavier vehicles and lighter vehicles, or is it just basically a thing on the road and that can count the number of the traffic light?
So the monitoring that's used won't differentiate at all. The exposure tool that's been developed by NZTA can. It has obviously traffic counts for particular roadways and can tell heavy versus light. It has that information. But in terms of the straight sampling, it doesn't differentiate at that location.
And presumably in this discussion we're differentiating between NO2 as a greenhouse gas and its contribution to global warming, and NO2 as a poisonous gas that can harm human health if breathed in. It's quite a different situation, and I guess that even just using your common sense, you'd look at Invercargill and say that our traffic volume is a lot less than it would be in, say, Christchurch, Auckland or Wellington, and clearly our contribution to climate change from NO2 from vehicles here and around the city is much less. Would that be a fair comment?
That's not what's reflected in the report.
Owen, I'll get you to answer that, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is fair that this report is focused on the health impacts of NO2 as opposed to the climate change impacts. And yeah, there are obviously greater traffic counts in larger cities as opposed to Invercargill. I guess what this report highlights for us is that the vehicle emissions, in this case primarily, well, almost exclusively from NO2, which is almost exclusively from vehicle emissions, are a significant issue for us and something we haven't really kind of been aware of or addressed in the past. So we obviously haven't done that monitoring, and this study, through the analysis they've done, it has identified that nitrogen dioxide is a much bigger issue for New Zealand as a whole than has previously been assessed. So it affects people at much lower concentrations than previously thought, and there have been a number of international peer-reviewed studies that have come out of this work, this report as a whole.
Yes, thanks, Owen.
I might just let Owen finish his presentation and then we can just cover off any of the major takeaways, like the one that Owen's already highlighted. Thanks.
Yeah, so we'll run through this quickly. So high-level findings there. This is across New Zealand. We look at premature deaths, so deaths that may not have occurred in the same time frame, and also looking at hospitalisations, both for cardiovascular issues and for respiratory issues. And we can see in New Zealand there we're looking at 1,300 deaths for fine particulate matter, so PM2.5, and 2,000 for nitrogen dioxide. We also talk about restricted activity days, and that's the value on the left-hand side there. So quite a large number of days on which people might not be able to undertake the activity that they would normally expect. So whether that's going to school, going to work, their health is adversely affected by air pollution. And of course, asthma prevalence there, which is primarily down to nitrogen dioxide. So of course, all of that is put into calculate the costs to society from air pollution, and the value used in that is the value of statistical life, which is a value that NZTA use for road safety initiatives to understand the benefits there. And so that's the values that we get at the bottom. We can see 15.6 billion total cost, and of course breaking that down between motor vehicles and fine particulate there as well. Southern region, these figures have been out, I guess, in the media and fact sheets before, but looking at the Southern region as a whole, we're looking at 95 premature deaths for adults, so that's classified as age 30 years plus. And of course, similar, looking at cardiovascular hospitalisations, respiratory, asthma prevalence and restricted activity days. So we can see that this is having an impact to the whole of the Southern region. We break that down even further and look at territorial authority level, Invercargill City, and to Gore District as well.
Can I ask a question? You said 95 people die because of impact of air pollution, or that's a part of it. How robust are those figures that actually give that? Because I've been trying to work out how many people die in Invercargill in a year.
Mm-hmm.
It's less than 600 by my calculations. So you're saying 15% of all the people that die in Invercargill, air pollution is a causal part of that?
Yeah, I guess to get into that detail, probably it's better to talk with the
Yeah, well,
reports
if
more.
we're going to use figures, we've got to be credible. And that's my worry. Otherwise, you put that out there, it just gets rubbish and you don't get any action. So I think if we're going to quote figures, we have to be accurate about it.
My response to that is that this is a very well recognised report. As I mentioned before, the components that make up these figures have been peer reviewed in component studies that have gone into HAPPINS as a whole. So the health impacts that sit behind it have been quite well established.
I spend a lot of my time undoing well peer-reviewed reports across a number of sectors, and I just, Janelle's going to say something.
I am actually. I might just move us along a wee bit. Appreciate your concern, Councillor Roy. Peter, I will let you now that it's already happened. But
good point. So
last time,
could I ask Owen, what would be the benefit, and this might be an action way forward, to get the author here to the subcommittee through Zoom and give us an overview of the project, and maybe inviting some reps from the ICC to come and sit alongside us so we can make some sense. Do you think that could be a good idea?
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea.
I wonder if this committee's the right one. Actually, might that be a council discussion or an S&P discussion rather?
I was going to suggest strategy and policy.
Yeah.
What about getting the idea of some ICC representation too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know these questions can be posted.
Right. Thanks, Owen. We'll let you get finished, please.
Yeah, just to finish off there, looking at how Southern compares, obviously in the news media we've had Invercargill City hit the headline as the city with the highest rate of premature deaths, and was sitting at 9th for that same measure, so per 100,000 people. However, if we look at the region level, Southland as a whole is sitting at 4th, equal for that same measure per 100,000 people, and by airshed we've got Invercargill 7th and Gore sitting 10th. So there are obviously different ways you can break up boundaries and assess the populations. And so that kind of just summarises the example there for you.
While we are on this issue, I mean, Invercargill's got some pretty bad press over the report, and I think we are justified in asking the questions that Eric's asking. There is a bit of a disclaimer in the health thing that that air pollution may have been a factor, but the underlying things, we see it with COVID too, that somebody was 95 and they died of COVID. Underlying factors there as well. But I think we do need to dig a wee bit deeper, and the other thing that worries me is there's quite a high degree of modelling with, well, saying that we weren't doing 2.5, so the model, the result. And the other one, I guess, is how the emissions were actually factored in. It appears to be quite a bit of modelling in that as well. Interesting that at least where that site is in an area where we do have high buildings, so that appears to be a factor. But if there are hotspots in Invercargill, really we want to know about them.
Yeah, let's deal with it.
Yeah, we're taking this seriously.
Yeah, I'm not trying to downplay what's there, but
Nor am I.
yeah, but we need to be credible in what we do. That otherwise we're going to lose the public.
And that Strategy and Policy Committee might be
Okay, you're handing it back to me.
the place for you to be credible, Councillor. Yeah. Questions at the last. I'll let Councillor B go first, seeing as he hasn't spoken.
So, monitoring of carbon dioxide, nitrous dioxide, and you say NZTA do it. Is it reasonable for us to consider having some more monitoring in the city for traffic gases? And what would be, as technology's advancing all the time as far as what might be available to use and or cost. So do you have an estimation of what it might cost for monitoring of carbon monoxide and or nitrous oxide, nitrous dioxide?
I think that there are obviously low cost measures available that would give an indication. If we were to monitor, too, in the city, we would need to look at the National Environmental Standards for Air Quality, and they set a limit for that. So we'd be wanting to use equipment that meet that standard. That is not cheap. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars to have a site that would meet that spec. So it is possible, but again, it would come back to kind of resources and funding available to do that.
So they sort of automated in a sense. You set it up, and largely you don't need to do anything else other than just the data flows.
Exactly, yeah. So it would be a telemetry site set up. It would require regular checks and calibrations, but aside from that, we would receive real-time data.
Given it's a public health issue, it might be something that the health sector could be helping us fund. Peter, last question, thank you. Oh, sorry, Robert.
Yeah, I hope to.
After Peter, thank you.
Yeah, maybe what Ellen just mentioned, maybe that could be a partnership thing within the Invercargill City Council. We could look at doing something like that. I would imagine there could be hotspots, like Stuart said, along the intersections and the traffic lights going through South City. But sort of have you got any ideas around what, for instance, say if you took 50% of the heavy traffic out of the city and rerouted them over a period of 10 years, what is that the low-hanging fruit, just off the top of your head? Could we do some sort of modelling on what that would look like with that signal? Please shift the dial, because at the end of the day, we are talking about public health, which there is some immediacy to this issue, I think.
Yeah.
It wasn't much of a question I sort of answered there, but you may know what I'm talking about.
Exactly. I mean, any reduction in any of these pollutants is going to have an improvement in public health, and we can certainly look to model that. There is obviously the health effects model that sits behind the Happens report that is available for us to do do that. We can put in a reduction of 50%, for example. It wouldn't determine where that 50% is going to go. We'll just assume it's been taken out of the pot, and that would give us an output of the health outcomes from that change. Yeah. So it's certainly possible to do that.
Thanks. Robert?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. And because this is a climate change meeting, I've got two questions for Owen for clarification. One is, Owen, have comparisons been made with NO2 levels in the city and NO2 levels coming from farmland? That's my first question. And the second one is about particulates, because I understand that particulates are not necessarily regarded as a negative light in terms of climate change, in that they, if they're in the air, in the atmosphere, perhaps the upper atmosphere, they reflect a lot of light back out into space, light and heat, which otherwise would contribute to climate change. So have you got thoughts about that?
To answer the first question about NO2, this study in particular doesn't differentiate between city and outer areas. It does, perhaps not correct. It does assign values for every census area unit across the country, and so certainly those in farmlands will have a value assigned to them that would generally be a background value, but it's not. I think you would have to ask the report's author to understand how they've assigned that particular value for that area.
Yeah.
And in terms of particulate, yes, there are obvious effects in the upper atmosphere. Most of what we're looking at here is in the boundary layer. So I think it's hard to know. We haven't kind of looked at the exact effect of that for Southland.
Okay, thank you.
Janelle?
Thank you. I guess just to wrap this conversation up, I think getting the report author to strategy and policy will arrange for that to happen. I think some of these questions will be best answered by the author of the report. I think the other factor is that we have some councillors in the room who are part of regional transport committees, with meetings obviously happening tomorrow, and so some of these suggestions might be things that could be taken back to those committees and then reported back next time the subcommittee meets.
Madam Chair, can I say, I want to do that. I'll get James Cagle to actually contact you directly, because I think there is a team approach here. We may be able to help everybody out by working together and understanding this process, so that all the TAs, ourselves, and what we're taking. They're doing some work, so let's try and take down the silos and get some transparency. I'll try and set that up tomorrow.
Thanks.
Remind me.
We're not going to be alone with that traffic problem in Timaru's, Dunedin, they've all got heavy traffic running through the middle of their cities.
And Queenstown's even worse, so they've got congestion within 10 years, they'll be stalemate, won't be able to move. So there's some big issues we've got to deal with.
Thank you. Right. Thanks very much, Owen, for the short version of that quite extensive report. Clearly some passion involved, but appreciate your time. Thanks.
For you, Chair, I was just going to suggest if there are additional questions that councillors or mana whenua representatives have, those could be submitted to staff and we can make sure they're addressed in the presentation to the Strategy and Policy Committee.
Great. Thank you. Right, we will move on to item 5, which is the climate change theory reflection and next steps. Janelle, would you like to lead this off? Just conscious that we now only have 27 minutes and that we would like some next steps. But we'll see what Janelle's got for us first and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
I will probably just hand it over to the floor. We had the Climate Hui on the 4th of July, which brought in Tammy and all of the councils and Great South. I think the overwhelming feedback from the day was that everyone is ready to come together and take action in a joined up way. The key discussion that we need to have now with this committee is what that tangible next step is to continue driving this action on climate change. So I'll hand it back for feedback.
I'm going to start that off because I can. It would be fair to say that there was a really positive feeling in the room all day, actually, and my feeling was that there was general consensus that a region-wide approach to these issues was imperative and fairly urgent. But I'm interested in how other councillors perceived it and what they think might be next steps that are achievable. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there was more than a feeling. I think there was a mandate. We got quite clearly from that Hui to go forward. So it's firmly in our camp now. So
We're the driver.
we are, and I think my view is that we need to consider drafting a letter to our other partners that were in that room that day, and with an intention of forming a full committee out of this council on what to do with climate change next term. How that would look and perform that committee would be up to the new council, of course, and the people that come along or wish to join that. But that would be a suggestion of an action going forward.
Thanks, Peter. I think there's some points we can discuss within that. Actually, it's quite a big, it's quite a big thing. Anybody else? Comments? Thanks, Councillor Roy, and then Councillor McKellen.
Robert.
Oh, sorry, and Robert. Sorry, Robert.
I was just going to echo what Peter said. We showed the initiative of calling that together, and I think, as Peter said, there's a clear mandate to go forward. So a pan-provincial representative from the three TAs and us, some kind of combined committee. We would also need to set some terms of reference, which would probably be the most challenging thing. I think there's a mood to go there, but to set terms of reference as to what we could do is something that we need to put our mind to before this triennial thingy concludes, so that we're ready to roll soon as the next councils are elected.
Thanks. I have a suggestion for that, but we'll come back to that. Councillor McKellen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My understanding from the Rural Forum is that they were happy for ES to lead this work, but they will be involved. So whether that's at staff level and council level, so we can decide that. I think there is probably a view here that everybody needs to look after their own camps first to understand what missions they have. So we have a profile, same as ICC in their own right. But then there's the second part, which is the collective. How can we work together to actually solve some of these things? And it looks very quickly that we're going to have to go out of the region with Mokanatahi and others to actually help us do that. This is actually multi-complex and take the global view on this. So that's my straight up comments. I think we need to bring the youth in. I wasn't there because I had COVID, but I understood that the youth brought quite a different aspect to it, and it was quite refreshing. So we need to make sure we've got the right parties in the room when we're actually doing that.
Thanks. Councillor Guyton.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, everyone. No, I think we shouldn't underestimate how effective and successful that day was. It's easy not to see what the value was, but I thought it was we achieved more than we expected to, and that's because it wasn't just us doing it, it was all of those other groups that came in, and in particular iwi. I would say that was a major consolidation of our partnership. I really felt that a lot. in the same way that I felt when we went to Te Aroha and heard the regional forum present their findings for the first time there. But what we saw as well was the effect that being together had on all of those involved, even you and Piri, if I dare say it, was transformed by, but what he was transformed by was time spent with people with other views, and they were likewise transformed by time spent with him. And I think that the hui that we set up, is the start of just that. It brought everyone together. It shows huge promise, and it's a very major step in my view. The second thing is that in terms of a next step, I think it's really important that what we do now is, even before forming a shared committee, is to ask those other groups what they think the next significant tangible step is. We need to get them to have a meeting amongst themselves with a genuine intent to present to us, the core of the movement, what it is that they think is most important, rather than waiting around for us to reflect back on them what we think. So that's my view. We need to communicate with them and say, thank you for coming. Now, what would you like to see happen the most? And they'll put forward what it is that's most important to them.
Thanks, Robert. Councillor Horrell.
Yes, Madam Chair, I think the item we're talking about, air quality, is possibly a wee bit of a driver to move this thing forward. I don't disagree with what Robert's saying about talking to people. Obviously, already our staff are working quite closely together, but I think the idea of a joint committee is good. But you might find you've got subcommittees. I mean, you've got the vehicle emission thing we're talking about at the moment, but you've got the coastal retreat conversations. The mandate that really got from the Mayoral Forum was they wanted some regional leadership to get some consistency, but that didn't mean we weren't doing it without their involvement. And if we don't have a joined up strategy, it won't work. So we've got a number of things coming forward that we need to deal with, and so I think it probably is timely to contact the other councils. So we've had the hui, what are your views? Do you want to set up something before the election, or not? The committee can be there. It obviously would have to be refreshed after the election, but I think we do need to show a wee bit of leadership here and keep the ball rolling.
Thank you. Councillor Beard, and then Mr. Bull, if he has, or Anne, if you have something to contribute as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I think it was a great day, and you asked for contributions from minds to grind on various points, and I'm sure that work has been summarised somewhere, and it's been understood, I suppose, the themes and or the mood of those who attended. So we've got some weight to go forward, rather than thinking, oh, well, there's some like-minded people here, but yeah. So I think we obviously need to see that, or it needs to be distributed back at some point. Or I did quickly look at the link that Canterbury put up for their shared result, and I guess, I don't know, it's pretty simple at this point, but it does reflect the fact that they want to be joined up on it as well. All the councils are listed at the bottom. They're all contributing. They all want to be involved, and so I feel it is a Southland issue, and we need to move forward. Eric's right. We've got to set it up in a way that there's buy-in, and that buy-in also has to mean finding some readies to contribute to it. Whether we need to have how the shared services would work, that needs to be understood, and who's going to contribute, because otherwise it becomes a wee bit of a talk fest, and how does it then get action? Plenty to do, but I think our minds are focused on it, and little events like air quality give us that reminder that it's a regional issue.
Thanks, Councillor. Stuart?
Kia ora. I guess just straight away from that, hui, there was a discussion in the korero let's keep the momentum going, or we've got it going, and don't drop the ball on this one. And it was my understanding that it was the reasonably clear mandate that we fought to form a collective with the TAs and the S and others who might have been there, and maybe there's others out there too. As we're going wider, I think we might share that information, but we don't want to get too wide either, do we? Collective here, as Helen said, stuff just beyond some really hickory at this time. If we go too wide, certainly share that information between us, but no, I'm just keen that we do get that, keep the momentum going, and I would encourage this council to put that terms of reference and stuff together if they can prior to whatever form of council we might see coming at us next time, because I would say I've got full confidence in this group of people here to do that, and if they've got something set up, because if we have too big a change, I can't see this being front of mind, as a priority somehow. And so if we can have something that's already in motion, pick up on, rather than having to start it, I think that would certainly help. I can just say, I spoke to Cara recently from Riverton. I spend very little time outside after dark. And I'm not because I'm scared of the dark, it's because I'm scared of the smoke and the pollution that's out there. I really do know. And I've talked to friends and associates of mine and trying to ask them their opinions, and they go, what are you talking about? They don't even notice it, they don't even see it, because they've been living amongst it for so long. Well, I don't know, or else they don't go outside in the night or in the evenings, but they just don't notice it. It's that thing, what's normal? Normal is what you're living with, isn't it? And you've grown up with and living with. So I think a whole lot of people in the city and such like just consider that this is normal. What are you going on there? So yeah, but yeah, I'm just keen that we keep the momentum going now. And as I say, I've got a lot of confidence in the collective that are here sitting on this table now, and I'm not sure who's going to be sitting here in the new round up.
Kia ora, thanks, Stewie. Anne, did you want to comment?
Kia ora, Chair. Unfortunately, I had common influenza, not COVID, and wasn't able to attend the workshop. However, I have heard wonderful things about it, and I just support the comments that I think momentum is really crucial, and a united effort to drive that kaupapa forward. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thanks, Anne. I would like to make a couple of suggestions then, given that we don't want to waste any time and that we've got elections coming up, so there may be different personnel, which we should not stall our progress. And also, going back to my comments at the end of the day about this not becoming a bureaucratic nightmare and yet another meeting for a meeting. So, having considered all of that, I would like to suggest that as a first step, we invite a staff member and a governor from each of those councils to get together initially to frame up perhaps the terms of reference, perhaps the work programme, the expectations, Robert, that those other councils might have and priorities, so that we've got something underway regardless of what happens over the next short while. And at the same time, get some work programme, some mirahiku work programme kind of guidelines and priorities set up so that is happening anyway. And then post-election, that work is still going across all the councils and the personnel. There won't be a lag of, a couple of months while people get up to speed. So it would be great if we could invite a governor and a staff member from each of our fellow councils, including, and Tammy, I'm sorry, they're just always in my head. Apologies, I will mention you specially, because you're just always there, Stuart. To set up those expectations and get some things going, and then there's also for us personally our internal work program. As I've said before, there's the kind of big global stuff that region-wide that we need to deal with, but there's also our own internal work programs as well. So I would ask that we have a summary of the thoughts and findings from the day that were on those lovely big sticky things, included with an invitation to get 2 people from each.
Robert wants to speak.
Yeah, so that's what I'm proposing in the short term, but Robert.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't mean to cut into what you were saying. That's very wise, what you're suggesting there. I'm just wondering if, I know we had Judy, was it, from the Climate Commission speaking. I wonder if at this point, on a national scale, we should seek a bit of recognition for what we've achieved here and contact someone well up the ladder who can speak to us about the fact that we've got to this point, which is exemplary, and what that means to those people at the top end, at the at the high governance end of climate change action in New Zealand. I don't know if that's possible, but it would be good, even if it was just a brief Zoom interjection into our meeting, just to say, well done, you guys. And I think we need that, and that'll be good for our partners, especially Tammy. No, just to get that kind of stamp of approval from the wider, from the authorities. Basically, I know it sounds a bit simple, but that is how I feel.
Have you got James's number, Robert?
He's here with me now, Alan. Would you like to speak with him?
Janelle, I'll leave that in your capable hands because I think that's a really good idea. Peter and then Stuart, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I support your comments, and I think that's exactly the direction you need to be going. And just also want to just address what Robert said. My feeling is that we're doing this more for Southland, because if we have a joint up response, we will, in my mind, we're trying to avoid overlapping responses from all our councils, and that goes right to the heart of the welfare for the ratepayer. And if we can avoid a lot of those overlapping responses, I think that's the key here for me. So that's the way I see it, more localised than nationalised.
Nothing wrong with the pat on the back from the people up the road though, right?
Yeah, totally support what you're saying.
Thanks, Peter. Stuart.
Yeah, kia ora. Also support what you're saying. I'm just from the Trade Industry or not, that saying we might put together a terms of reference draft that might be considered rather than sitting down and then trying to put terms of reference and got something on paper for people to consider prior to, and at that we'll have to move things along a little bit. And that's it. There's a saying about he who wields a pen.
Agreed. Yeah. And given that the next item on the list is our own terms of reference, we'll be sorting that one out first. Thanks. I think we had Councillor McCallum and then Councillor Horrell.
I think your idea is logical, makes sense, Madam Chair, and I think Robert's point about touching base with the higher authorities is about making sure that we're not way off on a tangent. It's about making sure we're in the same work stream, as it were, but we'll take the local flavour first, and we're selfish to that. I just want to add, the private sector's doing stuff as well. So it's not just about the local governments and stuff. I know there'll be 2 hydrogen plants in here by Christmas. 1 truck's going on this year, and there's 10 going on next year. There are things happening at pace within the industry. We need to connect in. So my suggestion is that we probably need to bring some people to this committee to present what they're doing from the private sector to actually help us understand. They are seeing and hearing guidelines and commentary and they're being held to account. We need to connect with them to understand how fast they're going, what can we hang around it, what support do they need, etc., and vice versa. So it's a two-way communication.
Funny you say that. I was listening to an item on the radio on my way here about the wasted energy of commercial buildings and how how they need to be more smartly and more cleverly designed for energy efficiency. So that is exactly what you're talking about.
The conversation's actually quite big because we talk about trucks going past in Invercargill, but we've actually got a major transport hub in the wrong place. But it's where the old wool dump was. To get in and out of there, to get to Bluff, is a hassle. So we need to think about, talking to ICC, about where we place these things going forward and how do we actually streamline these systems.
That will fit the regional spatial strategy as it morphs into something.
In the short term, identify the problems and then try and find solutions over time.
Yep.
But what I really want to say was the private sector is going, they are doing stuff because of their scale and investment. We need to be aware of that.
Great, and there might be partnerships in that space as well, right?
Could be.
Yeah. Chairman Horrell, quickly, and then Councillor Beard. Thank you.
Yes, just on Robert's comment, I think my approach would be to contact the speaker and say, look, this is what we're doing. I don't think we're looking for a pat on the back. We're doing this because it's important. And obviously there's a national direction that links with regional. So we want something sufficient. We'll have our own flavour, but we're also guided by.
Yep. Great. Yep. Councillor Beard.
Yeah, I'm just going back through to our climate change subcommittee terms of reference and obviously reading through point 5, opportunities for advocacy to central government to align and comprehensive tools. So I made a little bit of somewhat of a jest, Robert, but you are right. I mean, the more we work with central government, the more opportunity we have to ensure that they recognise what we're doing. And there's lots of noise and lots of pressure. And if we ask questions and look for support, then we might get it. Otherwise, Canterbury will get it, or Dunedin or Otago will get it. So we've got to advocate for our patch. And you're right, if you've got contacts in the right areas, you've got to use them. And so we've got to bring that collection of knowledge and opportunity to Southland.
Do we need a motion for the action?
Yeah, that would be a good idea. I'll draft it up.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just getting Rachel to draft up a motion to formalise the action around invites to council fellows and etc. Thankfully, she's going to do that. While Rachel's doing that, it also occurs to me that one of our next steps might be a youth climate change hui, because we actually only heard from one young person, and I think there would be tremendous opportunity to hear from a wide range of Southland-wide young people, and I know that's a big ask on staff, but actually I think we'd learn a whole lot and we'd be given some really good, clear direction from a multicultural environmental youth hui.
Yeah, just on that, Madam Chair, I noticed that the youth spokesperson had a minder in Gemma, and Gemma's obviously involved in the City Council, is it, with their youth?
Yeah.
I wonder if she might be a person to be involved in the gathering.
Yeah. And in my dreamings, I also would have us have our own youth council something or other with a climate change focus, perhaps, because that's where they are really easy to focus. But that's, a dream at this point. Thank you. Rachel, what have you mastered up?
So suggested resolution is that the subcommittee move that a letter be sent to all councils and Te Marama with a summary of the hui, a request for the priorities of that particular organisation, and an invite for staff and governance, or a representative from each, to join with Environment Southland to frame up a combined work programme and draft terms of reference.
How does that sound, everybody?
Sounds really good, but one thing we do have to realise that the next incoming council will have to have some input on the terms of reference. We don't want to be prescriptive now with 1 month to go.
It's a living document
To a
though.
point. So we have to play fair with the straight back in that regard.
Well,
I'm sure we will.
Yes, but it's a living document, so if there were personnel changes, my personal view is that the terms of reference can be modified by
We'll put
whoever.
it in there every 6 months.
But we
so-
need something to get going.
As a draft. Just another comment, when I spoke to the Climate Change Commission around Dr Lawrence attending the Hui, they did indicate they were coming to visit Southland in the near future. They were talking August at that stage. So we'll find out if they are coming down because they expressed an interest in meeting with us at that point
Great.
when they come down.
Beautiful.
That could be part of the enterprise.
Well, and an opportunity for those people to all get together, or the young people to get together with them. Stuart?
So is it still the intention that we might draw up terms of reference prior to?
Yes. Yeah.
I might end up spending a couple of hours just doing terms of
Yeah,
reference.
we can put that on the agenda for the meeting once it's, once we get a commitment from the councils. Yep, thank you. So I'm very happy to move that. Somebody like to second it? Thank you, councillor Beard. Any further discussion on that? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. That's quite momentous,
Yes.
actually, so well done us. Speaking of momentous, we now have 9 minutes to, actually raises a really good point that I would like to suggest that an hour is not long enough for our meetings going forward. So we might see if we can find slightly longer time in the already busy diaries for our meetings, because an hour's a bit of a squish.
Yes, apologies, we were
not you,
trying
yeah,
to
no.
balance the urgency to have a meeting close to
Absolutely.
the Hui with challenges and calendars at the moment.
I appreciate that we've managed to get this the following week. I think that's quite momentous also, so well done. So item number 6 is the terms of reference. Quite like to sign that off if we can. Yep, so I'm open to brief and concise alterations, amendments, improvements.
Overall, I'm happy with what's there, but I just wonder, I don't see that there in the terms of reference that the subcommittee will actually ask ES to do its own work and actually account for its own emissions. It's not, it's sort of partly there in 6, but it then very quickly goes wide. I'm just wondering another clause, really clear to make sure that there is 2 parts here. One is we're going to look at our own emissions, whatever that looks like, and then the second one is we have a community-wide responsibility which we're going to lead. I don't actually see that in the terms of reference, and because of the last report we talked about at the early part of the agenda, we talked about greenhouse gas emissions to ensure the climate change resilience and future for Southland. Should we be putting a more general comment there, because we need to talk about NO2, and is it just greenhouse gas, or what is it? Is it emissions in total? I think we just need to be clear about making sure the scope's wide enough, because that to me just looks quite narrow on only talking about greenhouse gas.
What's your thoughts on that, Janelle?
It's a good point. I think it's potentially a bit of a conversation point, because I think, as was raised during Owen's discussion, there is a bit of a differentiation between NO2 as a greenhouse gas and NO2 as a human health issue, and whether we have to differentiate that in the Climate Change Committee to look at greenhouse gases only, or whether we think that the remit should be extended to, some greenhouse gases as a public health concern as well.
And I'm happy not to necessarily name it by NO2, but to give a public health view, I think of what we've discussed today would be reasonable, but that's just the 2 things I saw that didn't actually capture it as well as I thought we might have, to give the committee the room to go where it needs to go, because you've got to follow a journey.
But like I said before, it's a living document, so if we found that there was something that needed to be changed, we could.
I think the reflection on the internal work is really good, and we'll go back and reword some of that, because I think there is a clear remit for this committee, not just to have that external focus, but leadership is about having that internal focus and making sure that we're doing the right thing as well, and that needs to be a really clear component of what it is responsible for.
I would put something up there about leadership, regional leadership and leading by example, higher up the list than number 7. Although they're not necessarily hierarchically organised. That's kind of how your brain works if you number them. Peter, did you have a thought?
Just 2 points. So
Yep.
I think inserted in that terms of reference, we should be discussing energy security and conservation of energy in those matters, because it's going to be made as we decarbonise, and people seem to miss the point. The biggest effect will be cost and unavailability of cheap energy. So it's going to become an emerging large issue within climate change, and it would be good to have it sitting off to the side. You may not focus on it much initially, but it's going to become a bigger focus. So
I wonder if it's
debatable what sort of influence we may have, but at least talking about the conservation of energy in their communities.
Yeah. Is there, Janelle, is it helpful to identify those particulars in the terms of reference, or is there another mechanism within or under the terms of reference where we could list some of those priority areas like energy, like air quality? I'm just wondering how helpful it is to have some of those specifics in the terms of reference.
I think having it covered by things like at point number 2, we've got including emerging issues and impacts, so that arguably could say that the terms of reference are broad enough to cover anything. There'll be things that pop up in a year's time that we haven't turned our minds to right now. So having a statement about emerging issues could then allow some of those future things to come into the subcommittee. I do, however, think having a list of priority areas, and that would start to inform the regional climate change strategy as well, that one of those priority areas could then be energy, and a priority area could then be air if we wanted it to be air as well. So that could sit outside of the terms of reference and also be a really living document as well, so that as emerging issues present themselves, it enables us to be agile in how we respond to it.
Yeah, because it would be, I wouldn't like to lose sight of some of the particular areas of interest that this committee has.
That's right, but
But also,
a threat to
absolutely. But as far as the specific terms of reference of the subcommittee,
It's only the 6 actually picked it up.
yeah, but I think perhaps starting a list of some of those things that people bring forward.
It's helpful for the work stream of the committee.
Yeah, and then we can prioritise ourselves what we think. Councillor.
Madam Chair, can I suggest that a revised terms of reference be circulated, and that if we're happy with it, we can go ahead.
Yeah, I think we could do that via email if you approve it, so that we're up and running. That'd be great, thank you.
Can I be included on that, please?
Oh, I don't know.
He wants to be in this committee. I think that's what
Anybody is welcome to attend the committee meetings,
It's just that the overlap with the transport is so strong,
Yeah.
that's why I felt I had
but
to
you've
be-
got Ellen here too, so. Given that we're, oh, sorry, Stuart.
Just in the, I think it's the last paragraph, we talk about partnership with Tammy. Can we
Put it at the top.
use the term Mana Whenua?
Sure.
Not might be term Mana Whenua / Tammy.
It's using the word te environment.
No, great, thank you, Stuart. And please accept my apologies for not asking you to start us off this morning. But I'll, in a moment, ask you to tidy us up at the end, because that's just as important. Councillor Beard?
I did my homework, so can I?
Well,
can I-
absolutely. I was just coming to that, actually. I had a feeling.
All right, so what I wrote down is something I've learned was, so I wrote, prioritise the policy change from water and air that will have the greatest impact on creating resilience to our climate change in Southland. For example, multi-facilitated wetland creation. So we improve water quality, we have retention properties to slow down the flow from high rain events. I'm not sure if anyone saw the news or the TV news component looking at Westland's problems again, or in Westland, what's the bottom of the Buller River, Westport, but also water storage to increment flow for periods of low flow. And I don't know who's familiar with the Benmore Dam, but it's sort of got two of those characteristics already, and so whether there's potential there for the third. And again, it's whether there are other areas in Southland that have potential for that type of approach, whereby if we can store water, we can improve the quality of the water. But I think I'll make my point.
Yes, thank you. I might get you to send that quote through to Michaela, and you'll start with him. Sorry, Michaela. Oh boy. For posterity's sake, thank you. Appreciate you doing your homework. Well done. I'll give you another sticker.
Drop the fish.
Oh, okay. So, who was it that suggested a revised term of reference? Councillor Horrell did. So I'll take that as a resolution.
That's an action.
Thank you. And Councillor Roy has seconded that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Stuart, can I ask you please to close us off with the karakia? Thank you.
Nā ranga te man tēnei hui, tēnei kaupapa, te whiriwhiri korero tēnei kaupapa. Hei karakia ka mutu tēnei hui ke tau, ke tātou katoa te ata whai o te tātou araki e hukaraiti, a me arha ke te atua me te whiwhinga tahi tanga ke te wairu kaupapa aki ame.
Kia ora, Stuart. And keep doing your homework, everybody. Just, send stuff around so that we all keep learning stuff. She said in a very official capacity, using the official stuff reference. Thanks very much, and I'll hand you over to whatever the workshop is next. Thanks for being so patient, the rest of you.